Good morning. Today I'm going to fast forward my first 46 years and try to tell you a story about my last four that hopefully will tie up much of my learnings. On my journey through life, I actually stopped off here in Bangkok in 1988 when I was working in drug prevention and gave a speech here at an EARCOS conference at the Spring Directors Conference. So I thought it's interesting how things come around quite often in our lives. I'm going to really hit two bullet items for you today. One is the greatest learning I have that you all know, and that is that education has to be focused on students, not on things. Not much has changed in 50 years. Parents have always wanted their children to be happy, to be healthy, to be ethical, and to be well educated. And one of my goals in life is to try to keep a focus on those. I believe that an extremely successful student academically who is unhappy, unhealthy, and or unethical is our failure, not our success. And secondly, I learned that students need to know we care for them and we believe in them, as evidenced by this letter I received some years ago. Hi, Mr. Farrell. I was a student at Kaohsiung Area High School. I graduated in 1984. I am now 39 years old. I just want to say that your caring made a difference during a crucial point in my life. Your open door policy and the natural compassion you showed was an important early lesson for me that some people do care. I don't know if you remember when you approached me. I did happen to remember that. I happened to be sitting outside the library, literally contemplating my future. For me, it could have been a serious turning point. I was about ready to give up. And you asked, "Are you okay?" It surprised me that someone noticed that I wasn't okay. You stopped the wheels from rolling the wrong way that day. I then sought help through the school counselor because of you noticing. And that all set me on the right path. I had a dysfunctional family, but after high school I persevered, putting myself through college, and had a great career in corrections and head of security for companies such as Lucent Technologies and Oracle. I have since moved back to Maine for the slower pace, and now following my passion. I have always just wanted to say thank you. Warm regards. I actually should be writing a similar letter to all of my students over the years, thanking them for helping to save me. And now right to my story, entitled The Big Test. I thought I spent my career preparing students for the big test. Ironically, they were preparing me. In March of 2014, after several months of being quite ill with GERD, which is an infection of the esophagus, including the day I coughed my way through a presentation here at EARCOS 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer that I had had for so long that my doctors said that I came to them half dead and was full of cancer. During the next 7 months of intensive chemo, in addition to GERD and cancer, I developed walking pneumonia and a serious lung infection that they could not diagnose. I had dropped from 175 pounds to 117 pounds. I was on very aggressive chemo. I had been in chemo 7 of the 12 cycles when it was determined that I just didn't have enough strength to continue with the chemo due to the infection, or they thought that I didn't have enough strength. They put me in the hospital for the 4th time, and in total, I was in isolation for a 6-month period with little hope of recovery. If I had taken this big test on how to survive by myself, I would have failed. It took 17 doctors to keep me alive by finding the cause of the infection. I learned and experienced the value of groups. I am thankful my doctor asked other oncologists for help, networking, when she could not figure out why I was getting more ill by the day. If a caring staff at the hospital hadn't given me clues on what to do, I would not have passed. know what to do when you don't know what to do. I was a bad patient. There's no question. Every doctor I've ever had have said I was a bad patient. In this particular case, when you talk about know what to do when you don't know what to do, I'd been in the hospital and I was just tired of all the needles. And the person from the lab came in to give me a needle, and I just hated these needles that they would give me in the stomach, one in the morning and one at night. And so I just said to the lab technician, you're not going to give me the needle today. And she wanted to argue with me, and I said, I'm just not taking the needle. It's that simple. And so she called the doctor, and the doctor came in and said, you have to have the needle. And I said, what does it do? And he said, your chemo causes blood clots, and I want to make sure that you don't have a blood clot. In my sarcastic self, I made the comment, so you can only get blood clots in the hospital because you don't come to my house and give me the needle when I was at home. And so I'm not taking the needle. It's that simple. And he said, why? And I said, because it just hurts too much. I've had enough. And he said, and he was a great doctor. It wasn't my oncologist. It was a physician in the hospital in Portland, Maine. And he said, why don't you ask me if there's another drug you can take? And I said, doctor, is there another drug I can take? And he said, yes, there is. There's a drug that you can take in the arm. And instead of taking it twice a day in the stomach, you only have to take it once a day. And I said, could I have that shot? And he said, yes, you can. And I said, what's this all about? And you can figure out what it's all about. But in the end, what I said to him is, so I'm going to have to learn to ask the right questions if I want to stay alive. And he said, yes, you are. And I said, who do I ask the right questions to? And he said, your nurses. So I learned to ask the right questions and be a little more thoughtful on my journey. If I did not have my wife, who was my team captain and coach, there would have been absolutely no chance for recovery. I learned never quit, that you pick up from successful teams. Our sons are with me every critical moment. There were many others on the team fighting cancer. It takes a team to beat cancer. Like alcoholism, it's a family disease. Dick Kreitzer with his emails to me saying, hang in there, you're going to be okay. Some of our board members, Charles and Sophia and Jean, flew halfway around the world in a 24-hour period to visit with me, for 24 hours, to visit with me just to see if I was doing well. The rest of the board supported me right from the beginning. Tarek, on our board here at EARCOS, would send me emails, just a quick check, how you doing? All of those people carried me when I couldn't walk. Students were sending me thumbs up messages initiated by their teachers. Don Rock keep an eye on me when I was trying to figure out what was wrong with me. So many people played an important role in keeping me alive today. This support helped me to keep fighting when I didn't think I could fight anymore. I learned the importance of a strong support system. During one day in July 2014, I was told that death was within a few hours. I had to practice what I preached. I had to be a positive role model, for I had plenty. Margaret Chase Smith, first woman to ever be elected to the House and Senate in the United States, had been my mentor for 5 years. She taught me to follow your conscience. Greg Popovich of the San Antonio Spurs taught me to consistency, fight hard, stay loyal. Those are just examples of many models that I've had throughout my life. Now it was my turn. Most days I prayed for nighttime, and most nights I prayed for morning. At times it took every ounce of energy to get through the day. Sometimes just to get through an hour, sometimes just a minute. On this particular day in July, I knew that I could go to sleep that night and not wake up. You just know it. I can't explain why, but you just know it. And I knew it would be okay. I was tired. I was sick of the pain. Could barely breathe. I was depressed and I felt hopeless. I tactfully said my goodbyes to my family, to the loved ones. I remember my doctor at Dana-Farber told me early in chemo that if I were to die, it would be because of depression or infection. Unfortunately, infection leads to depression. That day I took my biggest test, my day of reckoning. but I was well prepared thanks to the many coaches, teachers, friends, and most importantly, my family, because they had taught me well. My sister asked me when we talked about this last day, she asked me when I was done talking, what happened? I said, I died. And I said, what do you mean what happened? I lived. But the actual story is that I stayed awake telling myself that I had to live, that I couldn't let those that cared about me down, especially my family and students. I had to give back to so many who had given so much to me. So how did I pass the test? The relevance of what I've learned in nearly 50 years in education kicked in. Everything we do has long-term ramifications. I'd been preparing for this test for my entire life. One of my students from Aspen, Colorado, named Neil Beitelman, who actually, if you read the book Into Thin Air, Neil was the one guy that survived in that Everest climb where several people lost their lives. And he used to come and speak to my students, and on one particular day, on a Q&A, one of the students said, so Neil, if you guys had left the summit of Everest when you were scheduled to leave, instead of waiting another 2 hours for people to reach the summit, everybody would have lived. And he made an incredible point that I pass on often, and I listen to, and that was that he said, no, any one decision that we made, any one bad decision that we made by itself would have meant nothing. But we made a series of bad decisions. And all those bad decisions led up, in our case, to people losing their lives. He said, it would be like you, a student, taking a test and failing it. You wouldn't say, gee, if I'd only studied on August 30th, or if I only paid more attention in class on November 5th. You wouldn't say that. It was a combination of all of your bad mistakes that led to you failing that test. And then his quote was, every decision you make has long-term ramifications. We all need to remember that we're constantly making decisions that are preparing us for the next day. I refused to lose. I learned the attitude to not quit from my sports background and from my teachers who would not give up on me when I was a student. I trusted my doctors and nurses, trust they had also learned through sports, family, friends. I was able to keep my sense of humor, especially when there seemed no reason to laugh. I can still remember my very first chemo session. It's scary. Never been sick a day in your life. You're sitting in a chair with about 30 people who are hooked up to machines getting their chemo. And I was sitting there just trying to figure out what happened. I mean, what's going on? And one of the early decisions I had to make was, do I put a port, have them put a port in me or not? A port, if you don't know, my chemo was so powerful that if they put the IV in your veins, it would collapse your veins. So they put a port in your chest and they hook the IV into that and it shoots it right into a large vein in your neck. And I was sitting there and a guy across from me, an old guy from Maine, fisherman, was being hooked up to a port. And so after he was hooked up, I asked him, I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, sure. And I said, I noticed that you have a port. And he says, yes. And I said, well, I have to make a decision to put one in or not. Can you give me any advice? And he said, oh yeah, I'll tell you right now, it's the best thing I ever did. And I said, oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And he says, yeah. And he said, there's only one other place I'd rather see this port. And I said, oh, really, where? And he says, in somebody else. And I learned right then that humor was going to get me through this. And so I was able to keep that sense of humor. And I must tell you, it's a rude awakening when you're going in every 2 weeks for 5 hours to sit with 30 people going through chemo, when you know most of them aren't going to make it through, and yet they can keep their sense of humor right to the end. I learned that from my father, and I was very, very grateful for that. I always knew the importance of being a positive role model, even when it seemed impossible. You have to find a way. The year before I got cancer, I lost my sister, a younger sister, to brain cancer. I had the same nurses and the same doctor that she had. And I have to keep her in mind when I tell you this important piece for me that helped me get through. And that is that when I used to run 5Ks or 10Ks in Taiwan, people would watch the race, and when you looked like you couldn't go any further, they would start cheering, Jai-O, Jai-O. And for me, that was about the first 10 yards of the race. They would cheer, Jai-O, this guy's not going to make it. And what it means is just keep on going. I guess literally means fill up the gas, but it means keep on going. That was my theme for the entire time I fought through cancer with chemo. Every time I'd get down, I'd say to myself, Jai-O, Jai-O. And I'd visualize the people cheering their way through. Because life is a race. We're all running this race for life. And my heroes, by the way, are cancer victims. Every single cancer victim practiced Jai-O. Had to fight it, because if you give up, you die. Now, I also know that I was fortunate. A lot of people who have cancer, it is incurable. There's nothing that can happen for them, but they still fight it to the end. So I believe that Jai-O got me through, and I'm still running the race. And Jai-O got my sister to finish the race. But we have to keep in mind that every cancer victim, for me anyway, is a hero and a role model. So anyway, as I was practicing this and things were going on, there was an important point in my recovery that things started to shift. And what happened is my doctor came in to do his morning checkup in the hospital, and they would put goals up for you. And the quick goals, I'm winding down quickly now. The quick goals were basically breathe, sit up. And on this particular day, I said to the doctor, I want to leave the hospital. And he said, why? And I said, I want to die at home. I don't want to die in the hospital. And he said to me, in order to get out of the hospital, he joked, you have to walk the floor 3 times. I couldn't get out of bed, remember. Can't tell you what happened. Maybe the drugs kicked in and the infection started to go away. Then I don't know what happened, the timing. But anyway, I got up and I called the nurse in. I said, I want to go for a walk. And she said, you can't get out of bed. You're in isolation. And I said, read the goals. He put those up jokingly. She called the doctor and he said, he has nothing to lose. So cut to the chase. I went out. She put the machine on my finger to check my pulse, and it had gone from 99 to 61 on 10 steps. And she said, you have to go back into the room. You're going to pass out. Turning point in my life. I said, I'm not going back in the room. Either I'm going to walk this ward 3 times or I'm going to die trying. And somehow I made it. I can't tell you why. And then things started to get better enough to cut very, very, right down to the end here to make my important point. So I was given a new lease on life, and I'm continuing the race today because so many people helped me to prepare for that test. Yes, education is about people. You too have the responsibility to prepare your students for the big test of life, and it's not the SAT. It's how to fight back when all odds are against you, how to never quit. And we must show students that we will never quit on them. Please do it well. Today I watched the sunset with satisfaction and fond memories. And I anticipate the sunrise with excitement and appreciation. I'm a very fortunate person. So now it's time to live my next chapter, and it stands to be even more exciting and rewarding. And the next chapter includes 2, not those 2, but 2 more characters to the test. Meet my grandchildren, Macy and Peyton. Thank you very much for all that you do.